but only one could go to school. My kind-hearted younger sister, Lily, gave up her spot for me, while she went on to marry the village chief's son. During those freezing winters, I rode my old bicycle to school wearing a thin, tattered coat, while Lily wore a bright red wedding dress and was carried off to the only two-story house in the village. After finishing high school, I worked at a construction site, earning money to pay for my tuition. Lily, with her belly swollen in pregnancy, strutted around proudly. "Come on, sis," she'd say smugly. "All that studying isn't as good as marrying a good man like I did." Years later, after graduating from college, I returned to my hometown with an investor. The village chief welcomed us warmly, hoping to earn some money from the upcoming land compensation. Lily, who had already given birth to 3 daughters, stood in the middle of the field, yelling furiously. When she saw the young, well-dressed investor standing beside me, her eyes turned red with jealousy. A life like that should have been mine, she must have thought. Overcome with rage, she pushed me into the rushing mountain stream. When I opened my eyes again, I had gone back 15 years in time. "Sis," Lily said, "you should marry the village chief's son. Let me take care of the studying." When I opened my eyes again, I was 15 years younger. Lily was kneeling before our father, sobbing uncontrollably. "Dad, please let her get married," she cried, tears falling like rain, as if marrying the village chief's son was some great favor granted to me. Back then, everyone believed that marrying well mattered more than getting an education. So in my previous life, when faced with Lily's proposal, I didn't hesitate to choose marriage. "Once you're married, you'll live happily," she said. "As long as you're happy, I don't care if I have to suffer." Looking at her soft, pitiful expression this time, I suddenly realized she had been reborn too. My father looked at his younger daughter kneeling on the floor, his eyes full of pity. "Lily really is such an understanding girl," he said, pulling his wallet from his pocket. Then he turned to me. "Come on. Since you've chosen to study, I'll buy you a new bicycle." My stepmother's face soured. She tugged Lily aside and whispered into her ear, "Why let that girl take advantage of you?" Lily smirked with satisfaction. "Don't worry, Mom," she whispered back. "I'll definitely live better than her." Watching the 3 of them leave the house together, cheerful and content, I felt nothing but a chill deep inside. People often say, where there's a stepmother, there's a stepfather, and after living through it, I knew how true those words were. Even after being reborn, I still didn't have a choice. In my past life, when Lily decided to marry the village chief's son, my father had taken out his wallet, back then to add to her dowry. This time, it was to buy her a new bicycle. No matter the lifetime, I was never part of their plans. But after everything I had gone through, I finally understood one truth. Some relatives are merely strangers who happen to walk beside you for a dozen years. In this life, relying on anyone else will never compare to relying on myself. The year I left that little village, I carved that truth into my heart. The day Lily started high school was the day I got married. Early that morning, my father borrowed a relative's motorcycle to drive Lily and my stepmother to the county high school. He said he'd come back later to take me to my wedding. The engine roared to life, and Lily turned around, her eyes full of triumph. "Sis," she said deliberately, "make sure you give birth to a son soon." I didn't bother replying. I quietly packed my things. The county was 30 kilometers away, and a round trip took 4 or 5 hours. My father said he'd return to take me to my husband's house, but I knew that was just an empty promise. I never expected him to come back. All my belongings fit into a single old suitcase. Just a few thin pieces of clothing and my only dowry, a longevity locket my late mother had left me. She had given it to me before she passed away, and I'd treasured it ever since. I still often dreamed of my childhood, when I would follow her around, trying to fasten that same locket around her neck. But just like me, she had always been stubborn, and never let me. I put the longevity locket around my neck and slipped into the wedding dress the matchmaker had brought over earlier. My fingertips brushed across the embroidered pair of mandarin ducks on the gown, and memories of Lily's fate in my previous life came flooding back. The village chief's family was the richest in the entire village, and every parent dreamed of marrying their daughter into that house. It meant a generous dowry and a powerful connection with the village chief, one that could strengthen a family's standing for generations. But fate was cruel. The village chief had only one son, named Ryan Lynn. I'd heard that his name symbolized the Lynn family's wish for strength and prosperity, with countless descendants to come. When Ryan was 7 years old, on a freezing winter day, he fell through an icy pond in the village. My father happened to pass by and pulled him out. In gratitude, Mr. Lynn brought New Year's gifts to our house every year afterward. Now that both families' children were grown, the village chief proposed a marriage alliance. It was considered a great honor. And of course, my father gladly agreed. Ryan Lynn? I murmured his name softly. In my previous life, I hardly met him at all. Everything I knew about him came from Lily's mouth. Whenever something didn't go her way, she'd run back to our parents' house, complaining endlessly about the Lynn family, cursing not only her husband but his father and ancestors too. Weak and useless, she used to say, over and over again. Yet, every single time, Ryan would swallow his pride, go fetch her, and gently coax her back home. As for me and Ryan, we'd only met once in that entire lifetime. The year I got accepted into college, my father threw a celebration, more to collect gifts than out of pride, and all the money went straight into my stepmother's pocket. Only Ryan personally brought me a gift. He handed me an envelope with about 1,000 yuan in it and said quietly, in his simple, honest voice, "Study hard, live well." "The groom's here," someone called. Outside, the lively sound of drums and gongs echoed through the courtyard, mingling with the matchmaker's shrill voice and the noisy chatter. I paused, taking a deep breath, then pulled the red veil over my head. Firecrackers crackled loudly in the yard as Ryan led the wedding procession, followed by a group of young men from the village. The matchmaker received her red envelope, her voice cheerful as she shouted, "Father of the bride, come carry your daughter out to the bridal sedan." In our village, it was an old custom. When a daughter got married, her father had to carry her out to the bridal sedan, symbolizing that he was personally entrusting her to her husband's family. The matchmaker called out 3 times, but there was no response from inside. She poked her head through the doorway, while the curious villagers outside began whispering among themselves. I picked up my old suitcase, steadied the red veil with one hand, and walked out on my own. My steps were slow and steady, not hurried, not hesitant. If I wasn't mistaken, my father was probably at Lily's dormitory right now, helping her make her bed. After that, they would go out to buy her a new bicycle, using the dowry money from my wedding, of course. The murmurs around me grew louder. "Her father's not even here? Guess that's what happens when a man takes a new wife. He stops caring about his first daughter." "Poor girl," someone sighed. Hearing their pity, I couldn't help but laugh quietly under my veil. Poor? I never thought of myself that way. I had 2 legs and 2 hands. Why would I need someone to carry me? Rather than being treated like an object passed from one person to another, I would rather walk out of that house by myself. That way, it would truly mark the end of everything that tied me to that home. I stepped up to the bridal sedan as the drums and gongs flared up again. The matchmaker gestured for me to get in. Ryan reached out, gently taking my wrist to help me inside. I noticed sweat glistening on his forehead. He was that nervous. Once I sat down, he kept a respectful distance, leaving nearly half a meter between us. Looking at his simple, honest demeanor, I couldn't reconcile it with the image of the heartless man from my previous life. Just like Lily once said, the wedding ceremony was simple. After the bridal procession came the bows to the ancestors, followed by the banquet. In the blink of an eye, night had already fallen. The bridal chamber was on the 2nd floor of the Lynn family home, decorated in a modern style, elegant and neat, like something from the city. Ryan and I sat side by side on the edge of the bed, both of us awkward and tense. I was nervous, but he was even more nervous than I was. I shifted a little closer and whispered, "How about we get to know each other first? We can figure the rest out later." He pressed his lips together and gave a shy nod. "All right." Seeing how red his face had turned, I couldn't help but sigh inwardly. I reached for his hand. "Come on, lift the veil for me. Otherwise, all I can see is red." As soon as he lifted the veil, his face flushed an even deeper shade of crimson. The shy atmosphere between us was quickly shattered by the roar of a motorcycle engine outside. Dad and my stepmother had arrived. I glanced at the digital clock on the wall. It was already past 8 in the evening. My in-laws had gone to their room early, around 7, to give us some privacy. But now, the noise from that motorcycle had woken the whole house. As soon as he saw me, Dad rushed forward, grabbing my hand, eyes brimming with tears. "Lisa," he said emotionally, "you're married now. Your father can hardly bear it. Sending a daughter off is like pouring out a bowl of water. You can't get it back. You men will never understand how this feels." Before my father-in-law or mother-in-law could respond, my stepmother jumped right in with a perfect performance. "Lisa," she said, "your father drove 3 hours just to see you." I let out a soft laugh. 3 hours? Wasn't it because you took Lily to start school? In truth, our houses were only a few turns apart. It would have taken 15 minutes at most. Ryan, still being his honest self, said politely, "Mr. Chen, Lisa can still come home to visit any time she wants." My dad immediately grew agitated. "She's already part of your family now. It's not appropriate for a married woman to go back to her parents' house too often." By then, I'd already seen through their little act. The only reason they came tonight was to collect red envelopes and change the way I addressed them, from dad to father-in-law. I quickly helped my father steady himself and smiled. "What are you saying, Dad? We're still one family. I just have one more set of parents now." Then I turned to my father-in-law and held his arm gently. "Isn't that right, Dad?" He nodded quickly, flustered. My mother-in-law, standing beside him, didn't look as easy to handle. Her face darkened, eyes rolling skyward. "Such formalities between family," she muttered. "Anyway, when will you be returning the dowry money?" The mention of the dowry made my father's face stiffen instantly. My mother-in-law's eyes widened in surprise. "The dowry isn't with you?" she asked. I nodded, then turned to Ryan, my tone half playful, half reproachful. "Honey, you really don't understand how things work. Hurry up and call them Dad and Mom. They still haven't given you your wedding gift yet." The argument that followed drew the attention of the neighbors, who soon crowded around to watch. With no other choice, my father reluctantly pulled out 200 yuan, his hands shaking. My stepmother tugged at him to leave, both their faces pale. Before they could go, I called after them with a smile. "Don't forget to return the dowry, okay?" The next morning, I got up early, but my mother-in-law was already awake before me. Taking advantage of her absence, I cleaned up all the trash left from the wedding, sweeping every corner of the house, upstairs and down. When I finished, I even prepared a hearty breakfast for everyone. In my previous life, when Lily had married into the Lin family, she'd been spoiled beyond measure. I remembered how radiant she'd looked every time I saw her back then, smiling, glowing, full of pride, and every time she returned to visit our parents, she made sure to brag about how well the Lin family treated her, never forgetting to mock me in the process. I never argued with her. In this world, there's no such thing as unconditional affection. Even my own father couldn't give me that. Ever since he married my stepmother, it was as if he'd gone blind to me. No matter how much I suffered, he acted like he couldn't see. That's why I've always remembered one thing clearly. People only love and respect you because you still have value to them. Later on, when Lily gave birth to 3 daughters, no one even bothered to take care of her during her confinement period. I looked at the dining table I had set so carefully. It was full of steaming dishes. I called Ryan and my father-in-law down to eat. Since my mother-in-law hadn't arrived yet, I didn't touch the food either. I sat quietly waiting for her. After putting in this much effort, I figured there wouldn't be much left for her to criticize me about. When Ryan noticed I wasn't eating, he set his chopsticks down too. "I'll wait and eat with you," he said. This man, so honest, yet so stubborn. I had already noticed that since last night. Although my father-in-law was the village chief, it was clear that the one who truly made decisions in the Lin family was my mother-in-law. Her name was Diana Lin, and she was known throughout the village for her sharp tongue and fierce temper. If I wanted to live peacefully here, I'd have to win her favor first. It wasn't until the food had gone cold that my mother-in-law finally appeared. I hurried to reheat everything and set it back on the table. "Do you usually do this much work at home?" she asked sharply. I nodded. "Quick hands," she said, narrowing her eyes. Not like that pampered girl everyone talks about. Maybe marrying you was the right decision after all. She put down her chopsticks and reached into her purse, pulling out 8 thick bundles of cash. I realized then that she must have gone to retrieve the dowry money for me earlier that morning. The moment I saw the money, my eyes lit up. Inside, I felt a wave of joy. Finally, I had some capital to start something of my own. But just as I reached out to take it, she pushed my hand away. Who said you could touch this? There are 80,000 here. I'll leave 20,000 for your parents. She pulled out a bundle, split it in half and handed me one portion. This part's for you. I'll keep the rest safe. I held the 5,000 yuan in my hands, feeling unwilling beyond words. But under this roof I had to keep my tones sweet. Thank you, Mom, I said softly. Her hand froze for a moment. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to call her Mom. She said nothing more, simply continued eating, but I noticed her chopsticks moving food into my bowl. Don't work too hard around the house, she said finally. If people see, they'll say I'm bullying my new daughter-in-law. I smiled faintly, holding the 5,000 yuan. Still, it was only half of what I needed to get started. Ryan, seeing that I wasn't entirely happy, stayed silent beside me, not saying a word. In some ways, Lily's old criticism of him wasn't entirely unfounded. Do you have any savings of your own? I asked. He nodded. I can lend you 5,000, he said. You can pay me back later. Without hesitation, he pulled the money out and handed it to me. I took it and began counting the bills, unable to hide my grin. He stood there quietly, watching me. What's wrong? Aren't you going to work? I asked, glancing up. He hesitated. Today's our first day of marriage. I wanted to take you to the county for a little trip. I laughed and gave him a playful punch on the arm. You could have just said that, instead of making me guess. Ryan had a motorcycle, so he drove me to the county town. Our first stop, at my request, was a bookstore. I wanted to buy a few books on agriculture to study on my own. In my previous life, I had majored in agricultural management, but when it came to practical skills, I couldn't compare to Ryan. I picked out a few books, along with a notebook and some pens. But as luck would have it, just as we reached the cashier, I ran into Lily. She was holding on to the arm of a man, standing so close their shoulders touched. The two of them looked flustered, yet intimate, as they flipped through a book together. I caught a glimpse of the title, The Fiery Little Maiden. My God. Forget how absorbed they looked. At this hour, she was supposed to be at her school's morning study session. Lily noticed me too. For a brief moment her eyes flickered with panic, but she quickly regained her confidence, clearly because she'd seen Ryan standing beside me. Compared to the man at her side, Ryan did look a little rustic. A little plain. Lily stepped toward me in her little high heels, swaying her hips as she stopped in front of me. Lisa, she said in that syrupy tone of hers. What a coincidence. You came to the county too? Oh my, you're even buying books. Do you even have time to read? Shouldn't you be home feeding chickens and pigs right now? Oh, wait. She snapped her fingers dramatically. I almost forgot. You should be busy giving birth to a few little piglets yourself. Her voice sounded cheerful, but her eyes betrayed a cruel sharpness. Every word she used to mock me now was exactly what she had gone through herself in the last life. Back then, my mother-in-law had also helped her retrieve the dowry money. But after being goaded by my stepmother, Lily had become convinced that my mother-in-law wanted to keep the money for herself. Out of spite, she snuck into my in-laws' room one night and stole every last cent of the dowry. Not only that, she even took my mother-in-law's heirloom jewelry. After that, rumors about her spread all over the village. Life in the Lin family became unbearable. Apart from giving birth to one son, she had no way to maintain her dignity. Over the years, she gave birth to 3 daughters and suffered 2 miscarriages. The village women mocked her behind her back, saying she bred faster than the sows in the pen. In this life, she must have thought I would make the same mistakes she did. But I've always believed that fate doesn't have only one path. Lily, I said calmly, you know, getting into college isn't something you can do without studying. You can't just wing it. I meant it as sincere advice, but she brushed me off immediately. What would you know? She sneered. This is my boyfriend. He's the son of the district director. I turned my eyes toward the man beside her and instantly recognized him. In my previous life, he'd once tried to pursue me too. But aside from that impressive title, the director's son was nothing more than a spoiled, womanizing scoundrel. I'd rejected him flat out before, humiliating him in front of his friends. After that, his entire group made my life miserable. They bullied me relentlessly, and even the teachers turned a blind eye. I survived only by refusing to break. The crazier I acted, the less they dared to touch me. That man had gone through countless girlfriends, and even one girl had gotten pregnant and had an abortion because of him. But in the end, he used a college relocation quota to easily transfer to a prestigious university, sweeping his dirty past under the rug. I never imagined that even after being reborn, Lily still hadn't learned a thing. Depending on a man would never lead anywhere. "She's my sister," Lily said sweetly, turning to the man. "Just a country girl." The man narrowed his eyes at me, smiling wickedly. "She's cute," he said. "I've never tried the innocent type before." I looked at him coolly. "Men like you. I've met plenty of your kind." Before he could even respond, Lily suddenly raised her hand and slapped at me. "You think you can insult my boyfriend, you bitch?" But her hand never landed. Ryan caught her wrist midair, his voice firm. "It's wrong to hit people." Taking advantage of her stunned moment, I swung my arm and gave her a hard slap right across the face. Smack! "Don't mess with me again, Lily," I said coldly. "Remember this. Your fate is in your own hands, not decided by the heavens." I didn't bother saying the rest. Lily's face burned with rage, her feet stomping furiously on the ground. But in front of the district director's son, she forced herself to stay meek and innocent. In the end, she could only glare at me helplessly as I turned and walked away. Ryan and I stopped by a few stores to buy some daily necessities. When we passed a clothing shop, I asked him to stop. I picked out a few outfits for both of us, something simple but nice. When he changed into his new clothes, he looked noticeably refreshed, almost handsome. "Lisa," he said awkwardly, "thank you for buying such nice clothes for me. They must have been expensive." "It's fine," I replied with a small smile. "It's your money anyway." When we got home, I spent the next 2 days reading through all the agricultural books I'd bought. After that, I went out to the fields to take a look at the situation myself. The Lynn family didn't just have a big house, they owned a lot of land too. But the fields weren't being used efficiently. They only grew a few basic vegetables and fruits. I asked Ryan to take me out to the farm. To my surprise, the vegetable crop this year was doing quite well. I picked some of the freshest produce, packed it carefully, and went with Ryan to the county to try selling it. To our delight, everything sold out faster than we could have imagined. This only strengthened my resolve. I used to think he was lazy in the workshop, and only went out to the fields every day because of that. But no, he truly loved this land. Standing in the middle of the field, he spoke non-stop, explaining cultivation methods to me. His usual awkward, quiet manner disappeared. He knew exactly when the soil needed watering and when it needed to be turned. Honestly, I could tell when he was happy or not, even if he didn't know how to say it. I was so absorbed watching the soil that I almost missed what he said next. "If you understand planting, that's great. We can work together." After surveying the land, I decided we should try greenhouse farming, half organic vegetables, half strawberries. I ordered a shipment of plastic sheeting and steel frames. The goods were delivered right beside the field. To save costs, I hired a few villagers to help erect the greenhouse. I was so busy in the fields, I barely had time to eat. 3 meals a day, my mother-in-law brought food down to me. She didn't ask what I was doing, she just did it. As soon as the greenhouse was up and I stepped out of the field, I ran into Lily. She'd had the day off and come back to the village by car. My stepmother, acting like a town crier, proudly announced everywhere that her daughter rode in by car and that Lily's boyfriend was the district director's son. What luck she had. I was still muddy from the field when Lily rolled her window down, took off her sunglasses and said, "Lisa, what a coincidence. You're in town too? Buying books? Don't you have chickens and pigs to tend? Oh, almost forgot. Don't you have piglets to give birth to?" Her tone sounded cheerful, but her eyes were cold and poisonous, as if my better life in this world was my fault. The man sitting next to her was someone I didn't recognize. He clicked his tongue when he saw the greenhouse I'd built. Pretty modern, I've seen this on TV, makes a lot of money. The moment he mentioned money, Lily's eyes flashed with warning. She lunged to the driver's seat and stomped on the gas. The car tore into the greenhouse I'd just erected. The structure collapsed in an instant. I couldn't believe how reckless she was. She was terrified of me doing better than her. The car spun around the field twice, then sped away. I was shaking with anger. I grabbed my shovel and headed straight to my parents' house. Lily was sunbathing in the yard, my father fussing over her and rubbing her shoulders. "You've been studying hard at school," he cooed, kneading her back. I snorted coldly. After all, she spent every day flirting with men. The man sitting beside her had a tattooed arm. When he heard me, he jumped up and started shouting profanities, even lifting a chair as if to throw it at me. "How dare you talk about my girlfriend like that?" My stepmother immediately collapsed to the ground, wailing in a tragic show. Neighbors quickly gathered to watch the commotion. My father tried desperately to calm things down. Lily raged. My stepmother shouted. And there I stood, shovel in hand, watching the farce unfold. I didn't say a word. I swung the shovel down hard onto Lily's backside. "Don't touch me again," I warned. "Remember this, your fate is in your hands, not decided by the heavens." Lily clutched her rear and dove behind the tattooed man. "My boyfriend is the district director's son. You can't lay a hand on him." I hesitated because a district director's son was not someone to provoke lightly, but the next instant a large metal basin fell squarely onto the tattooed man's head. I turned and saw my mother-in-law, Diana Lynn, leading the Lynn family up the yard in a fierce, triumphant procession. She grabbed the basin and kept bringing it down again and again, like some sort of club, raining blows on the tattooed men until they were battered. Lily clutched her head with one hand and her backside with the other, screaming at the tattooed man, "Call your father. Tell him to throw them all in jail." But the burly, tattooed man shrank back, cowering to the side, not daring to fight. "What kind of district director's son is this? So pathetic," my mother-in-law scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. "No need to bother, I've already made a call. Though I must say, I didn't know the district director had such a son." In the distance, the wail of police sirens grew louder. The tattooed man's face turned pale as he stammered to Lily, "Damn it, I'm not the district director's son. I'm his driver's kid. You're the one who told me to do this." Terrified, the two of them turned on each other, clawing and shouting like wild dogs. Moments later, a police car pulled up right in front of the gate. A man in a neatly pressed suit stepped out, his expression calm but stern. "What's going on here?" he asked. My mother-in-law stood tall, pointed straight at Lily and the tattooed man, and declared, "They caused a public disturbance." Lily froze, staring at my mother-in-law in disbelief. She had lived in the Lynn household for over 15 years in her previous life, yet she had never known my mother-in-law had any connection to someone as powerful as the district director. The district director glanced coldly at the scene, then ordered the officers, "Take them both away." Panic washed over Lily's face. She turned desperately to my stepmother for help, but the woman didn't even look at her. My stepmother and father finally stumbled forward, clutching at my arm as if we were all still family. "Oh, come on now," my stepmother said with a forced laugh. "We're all relatives here. This must be a misunderstanding." The district director's face hardened instantly. "I'm on duty," he said flatly. "I don't discuss personal matters while working." He gestured sharply, and the officers dragged both my father and stepmother into the car as well. The entire crowd of villagers stood there, mouths open, stunned. No one had expected that in such a tiny village, someone could actually have ties to a district director. When everything was over, my mother-in-law invited the director back to our house. They were distant relatives, but even so, that still counted for something. As soon as he sat down, I hurried to bring out a plate of freshly cut fruit. He took a bite, nodded slightly, and turned to me. "You must be Lisa Chen," he said. I nodded politely. "I've heard you're starting a greenhouse project?" "Yes," I replied. Just thinking of my greenhouse being destroyed by Lily made my jaw tighten. "It's a good initiative," he said evenly. "Your startup subsidy has already been approved." "Really?" I gasped, my face lighting up. I couldn't believe it. Everything had gone through so smoothly. I smiled so wide I could barely close my mouth. My mother-in-law gave me a playful glare. This girl never stops working. She's in the fields all day, then comes home and still finds something to do. Look at her, she's skin and bones." I knew her words sounded harsh, but in truth, she had already begun treating me as family. I smiled gratefully. Without hesitation, she reached into her purse and handed me a bundle of cash. "Here, 100,000 yuan, take it and keep working on your project." I froze for a second, realizing she had truly kept the 80,000 from before safe for me and had even added to it from her own pocket. "Thank you, Mom," I said softly. Her eyes reddened. "Lisa, you suffered so much before you got married. I used to be strict with you only because I didn't want you to turn out like your stepmother. When you were little, I once saw a skinny little girl working alone in the fields. No adults in sight. I never forgot that. I hadn't realized that during all those years of hardship, when even my own father ignored me, someone had quietly cared. No wonder every time she passed by the edge of my field, there were always a few milk candies mysteriously left behind. Back then, even a single candy felt like a priceless gift. She wiped the tears from my cheeks. From now on, do whatever you want, my girl. Let me and Ryan handle everything else. With the money from my mother-in-law and the startup subsidy, I rebuilt the greenhouse from scratch. At the same time, I filed a lawsuit against Lily and the tattooed man. During the trial, my father shouted angrily from the stand. "Their family, damn it. Why are you targeting your own sister? You're both my daughters. You're a heartless, jealous girl. You just can't stand that your sister's doing better than you." Spit flew from his mouth as his finger trembled, pointing straight at me. So he did remember that I was his daughter after all. If that was the case, then why? When Lily went off to school, did the entire family go with her? And what about me? When I started school, I went alone, riding an old, rusty bicycle whose chain fell off 3 times on the way. Why was it that when my sister sat comfortably at home watching TV, I was the one out in the fields planting peanuts? Why was the coldest, narrowest room in the house always mine? None of those things had ever crossed my father's mind. I sat across from him in the courtroom, watching the entire scene play out as if I were observing a stranger losing his mind. The trial proceeded fairly. The tattooed man and Lily were ordered to pay all expenses for rebuilding my greenhouse. Since my sister was still under 18, she was only placed in temporary detention. When I went home that day, I wasn't alone this time. I went back with my mother-in-law, father-in-law, and Ryan. We carried the court verdict with us, practically glowing with joy. The new greenhouse had already been rebuilt, and to keep it safe, Ryan had even set up a small tent at the edge of the field where he stayed at night to watch over it. The seeds had been planted for some time, and in the past few days, the temperature and humidity had been just right. The strawberries were starting to sprout, and some fast-growing vegetables would be ready for harvest in just a few months. I learned to ride a motorcycle and began going to town and the county center every day. I couldn't just bury myself in planting. I also had to find buyers for our produce. Our vegetables were completely organic, grown without chemicals, so I decided to target the higher-end restaurants in the county. Only wealthy people cared enough about healthy eating to pay for it. I successfully negotiated with 2 upscale restaurants and signed 1-year supply contracts with them. That alone helped me recover most of my initial investment. The feedback from the restaurants was excellent, and my reputation gradually began to spread. I reinvested part of the profit into expanding the farm, shared another portion with my in-laws, and kept the rest for myself. My mother-in-law took the money without hesitation and gave me her usual line, "I'll hold on to this for you." Business was growing steadily, and I set a new goal: to partner with the most prestigious restaurant in the city, Royal Garden. If I could sign a contract with them, it would guarantee a stable income for years to come. So I drove straight to the restaurant. Before meeting the owner, I decided to order a meal and sample their dishes first. By coincidence, the table next to mine was unusually loud, drawing my attention. When I turned my head, I froze. It was Lily and her family. "Mom, Dad," Lily said sweetly, lifting her wine glass with a practiced smile. "Dinner's on me tonight. Order whatever you want. Mr. Bada Zhao's paying for everything." She looked so pleased with herself, and when my gaze dropped, I noticed her belly had begun to swell slightly. She was pregnant. At that moment, the restaurant owner arrived to meet me. The moment he appeared, everyone's attention shifted to him. Lily immediately sprang up, eager to flatter him. "Mr. Zhang," she said, "I'd like to offer a toast on behalf of Mr. Zhao." The owner waved her off politely. "Sorry, I have an important meeting to attend." Then he turned to me. I extended my hand first. "Miss Chen," he said with a professional smile, "welcome to Royal Garden. It's an honor to have you." I shook his hand. Behind me, Lily's eyes widened in disbelief. Her jaw dropped as if she couldn't process what she'd just seen. "What? How could someone who just digs in the dirt and grows vegetables have this kind of connection?" she muttered. As she spoke, she pretended to accidentally spill her glass of red wine all over me. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," she said, feigning guilt. My hand slipped. I didn't even bother reacting. From beginning to end, she had always seen me as her enemy, terrified that I might live a better life than hers. But as for me, I had no time for her petty jealousy. My mind was too full of numbers, profits, and plans. I simply turned to Mr. Zhang and asked, could we move to a private room to discuss details? Seeing me ignore her entirely drove Lily crazy. She couldn't stand that I didn't even care enough to get angry. She rushed forward a few steps and grabbed my arm. "Lisa," Lily said sharply, her voice dripping with arrogance. "I'm now the young madam of the Zhao family. Who do you think you are to act so high and mighty in front of me? Are you even listening to me?" She'd been dieting non-stop to keep her figure and please that so-called Mr. Zhao, so her grip was pathetically weak. I barely used any force to brush her hand away. "It's the 21st century, I said coolly. "You think being someone's young madam means anything?" But Lily wasn't done. She leaned close to my ear, her voice full of smug triumph. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "This time, you'll never catch up to me. The baby in my belly is a boy. He'll be the heir to the Zhao family. And you'll always be stuck in that little village, living like dirt beneath my feet." I let out a short laugh. "Please, who has the time or interest to compete with you?" I replied flatly. My indifference drove her mad. Her face twisted with fury as she spun around, ready to run off and find her Mr. Zhao for backup. But she had only taken a few steps when a shrill scream tore from her lips. She collapsed to the floor, clutching her stomach. She had slipped right on the puddle of red wine she'd thrown earlier. Wine mixed with blood spread beneath her, the two reds indistinguishable from each other. The ambulance was called immediately. Because she had been starving herself for so long to stay slim, her body was already weak and malnourished. The fall caused her to lose the baby. When Mr. Zhao finally arrived, he barely looked at her. "You lost the baby?" he said coldly. "Then don't bother showing up in front of me again." With that, he turned and left. I, on the other hand, signed a long-term contract with Mr. Zhang, the restaurant owner, and proposed an additional idea. His restaurant would promote my new pick-your-own strawberry farm. While managing my organic produce business, I also began developing agricultural tourism. Some families in the village had houses left empty because they worked elsewhere, so I rented those homes. After simple renovations, I turned them into cozy homestays and built a small countryside resort. Though our village was remote, it was surrounded by rivers and mountains, perfect for tourism. With private cars becoming more common, city people were eager to escape into nature for fresh air. Schools began organizing field trips there, and even art students came to paint the scenery. By winter, all our homestays were fully booked. Seeing how much money I made, the villagers grew envious and started copying my business model. But they didn't know how to manage guests or understand what city travelers wanted. I left them to their struggles for a few days, waiting until frustration drove them to come seek my help. Before long, everyone in the village stopped calling me the Lin family's daughter-in-law and started calling me Boss Lisa. That was my mother-in-law's idea. She always acknowledged my abilities. I managed the business side of things while she took care of everything at home. Sometimes I couldn't help but think, so this is the life men always dream of. A warm home, a caring wife, children, stability. It really wasn't such a bad deal. Instead of renting out every house, I hired many of the village women to work for me. The company wasn't large, but I named it Harmony Estate. I signed profit-sharing contracts with each of them. All the homestays followed the same pricing and worked together rather than competing. Every month, we held guest review meetings. Those with the best ratings received bonuses, while others got training and encouragement. It didn't take long for the whole village to transform. The gossiping aunties and idle housewives who used to sit around chatting now spent their days cleaning, decorating, and earning money. Conversations no longer revolved around whether someone had a son or a daughter, but about how to attract more tourists or what local dishes to serve. That little patch of land was no longer a man's world. The women who had worked themselves to the bone for years, once dismissed and overlooked, were finally claiming control over their own labor and their own worth. As for me, I was busier than ever. I bought a car and drove all over for business. Seeing how much I had earned, my stepmother showed up again, with my father in tow. Both of them came in crying, holding a bag of cheap corn cakes. "My poor girl, you've gotten so thin," my stepmother cried, rushing forward to hug me the moment she stepped through the door. "Look," my stepmother said brightly, "I made your favorite, corn cakes. I remembered how much you loved them, so I made some just for you." Corn cakes. Yes, I used to love them, back when one meal of 3 cakes was all I could eat in a day. Because every time I reached for a piece of meat, I'd get slapped 3 times across the face. My cheeks would swell, my stomach would ache with hunger, and only corn cakes dipped in water could fill me up. I curled my lips in disdain, then called the little dog in the yard over and broke the cake into pieces, tossing them to the ground. My stepmother's face darkened, but she didn't dare say a word. My father hurried to smooth things over. "Lisa, you're my flesh and blood," he said, his tone pleading. I almost laughed. "Flesh and blood? For 10 months my mother carried me, but you ignored us both. When she died, you turned away. And now, suddenly, I was your flesh and blood?" He sighed heavily. "Lisa, you're rich now, but your father's getting old. I don't have a son, no one to honor my memory after I'm gone. You have to take care of your father in his old age." I frowned. "But Dad, I'm not your son. I'm not your heir. What right do I have to handle your funeral rites?" Before I could finish, my mother-in-law stormed in with a broom, shouting, "Out, out! I don't care who you are. Get out of my house. This place stinks of bad luck already." Still, my father and stepmother shamelessly refused to leave. They sat right at the doorway, yelling and cursing like lunatics. I glanced at the clock. It was about time. Without another word, I turned and headed toward their house. They must have thought I'd softened, because they quickly stood up and ran after me. But just as we arrived, a black business van pulled up in front of their home. Several men in suits stepped out. My stepmother's face lit up as if she'd won the lottery. "Kiara," she called excitedly toward the house. "Your sister's here to pick us up. We're finally going to live the good life." Lily, Kiara, as my stepmother called her now, peeked out from inside. Ever since being thrown out by the Zhao family, she'd been forced to return to this crumbling clay house. She'd just given birth and, ashamed of her situation, hadn't set foot outside since. Her eyes widened as she stared at the polished van gleaming in the sunlight. "Why?" she muttered under her breath, over and over again. Not wanting the investors to misunderstand, I quickly introduced them. "These are my business partners," I said calmly. In that moment, the memories of my past life overlapped with the present. Lily's face twisted in disbelief. Her eyes reddened as she lunged toward me, her voice trembling with rage. "No, that's impossible. How could it be you? Why is it always you? Why are you the one who ends up lucky?" The men in suits quickly stepped forward to restrain her, forcing her to sit down. Her hair was a tangled mess, her face streaked with tears. Looking at her, I felt a strange pang of pity. She had been given a second chance at life, just like me. She could have chosen any path, any future. Yet somehow, she had still walked straight into the same mistakes. I looked at her quietly and said, "Lily, let me tell you why. It's because I never took shortcuts, and I never relied on anyone else." We might have swapped fates at first glance, but in truth, nothing had changed. I once rode a broken bicycle through snow just to get to school, my hands cracked and bleeding from the cold, yet I still gritted my teeth and kept riding. And you, Lily? You were born lazy. The moment you got to school, you started chasing rich boys. While I trudged through sleet and mud, you rode in their cars, selling your pride and your body for pocket money, pretending to be a high-class young lady. I studied desperately. endured humiliation from spoiled rich kids just to survive, never stopped fighting back, ate frozen buns in the corner of classrooms, and worked construction jobs until my shoulders were calloused and bleeding. And you? You sat in fancy cafes wearing off-shoulder dresses, fluttering your eyelashes at boys who couldn't even remember your name the next day. We seemed to live parallel lives, but our paths were always moving in opposite directions. Maybe that old saying is true, all roads lead to Rome, but the difference is, I walked there with my own 2 feet. You, on the other hand, spent your whole life waiting for someone else to carry you there. And that, right there, is why your road always ends in a dead end. You thought you could trade your beauty and your womb for comfort, but every choice you made was just another shovel of dirt on your own grave. She thought she could use her child as a ticket into wealth and status, but rich families had long since mastered the art of keeping the child and discarding the mother. I looked at her and gave a faint smile. "Lily," I said softly, "even if we were to start over 100 times, I still wouldn't lose to you." Lily froze for a second, then burst into hysterics. Meanwhile, the 2 investors who'd come with me walked a slow circle around my old family home. After a brief discussion, they made their decision. The house would be demolished and replaced with the new welcome gate for the village's tourist area. "Will there be compensation?" my stepmother immediately asked, her eyes lighting up with greed. She didn't even glance at Lily, who was still wailing on the ground. "Of course," I replied coolly. "That money will go toward covering the damages to my greenhouse. You remember the court ruling that was never enforced? Don't worry, I haven't forgotten." I gave them 1 week to pack their things and leave. Exactly 7 days later, they were gone. The official announcement was posted at the village gate. Our village had been selected as a model for a new countryside development project. The government allocated an investment fund and appointed me as the project manager. The old clay house where I'd grown up was soon leveled by an excavator. In its place stood a tall, beautiful stone archway that welcomed visitors to the village. The entire community buzzed with excitement, busier and happier than during the New Year. Everyone except Lily's family. Lily had lost her mind completely. She wandered around the village drooling, shouting nonsense. "I'm a live pig! I'm a live pig!" and sometimes even crawled into pigsties to lie there. My father and stepmother, terrified and angry, went to court to sue me, claiming I had failed to fulfill my filial duty. I didn't bother to stop them. They paid the court fee, only to return home with their heads hanging low, because legally I hadn't been their daughter for a long time. When I was born, the one-child policy was still in effect. My father, desperate for a son, had my mother transfer my household registration to her side of the family, just so he could try again. Later, my mother died, giving birth to another child, all because he couldn't let go of his obsession with having a boy. From that moment on, I never considered him my father again. After losing their home, my father and stepmother had no choice but to move back to her hometown. Rumor had it that they quarreled on the road, and my father abandoned Lily in the wilderness because she was too troublesome. She ate too much, refused to walk, and slowed them down. I never found out what happened to her afterward, nor did I care to. One evening, I stood at the highest peak overlooking the village. The place where I was born, once poor and forgotten, was now the most beautiful part of the valley. I reached into my blouse and took out the longevity locket my mother had left me. "Mom," I whispered, gazing into the sunset, "you must be watching me from somewhere far away. I promise in this life I'll live long and live well." The village flourished more with each passing year, and it was soon time to elect new leadership. The villagers wanted me to be the new village head, but I declined. My reasons were simple. I had other plans. Instead, I nominated 2 recent college graduates, young, capable, and unburdened by the web of small village politics. They were the future this place needed. Before long, a rumor spread that I was pregnant. Every morning, I jogged along the hillside, and the villagers whispered, "That's how city women prepare for pregnancy." 2 days later, my mother-in-law joined me, carrying a large metal basin in one hand. Anyone who dared gossip got smacked squarely with the basin. "What's wrong?" she would shout at them. "You that desperate to reincarnate into our family?" One sentence from her shut the entire village up. After finishing my work at the tourism project, I began packing my things. I was born on this land. It had once made me suffer, but it had also given me warmth. I had poured everything I had into making it thrive. Now it was time for me to step into a bigger world. I enrolled in an adult university program and planned to go abroad to see more, learn more, and discover the beauty beyond the mountains that had once confined me. On the day I left, the whole village came to see me off. Everyone's eyes shimmered with tears, especially my mother-in-law's. "Mom, don't cry," I told her, waving. "I'll come back often." She sniffled, nodding. "Fine, but next time I'm getting a passport and going with you." At the airport, I suddenly realized Ryan hadn't come to say goodbye. For all our years together, for everything we'd shared, part of me had expected at least a wave. But just as boarding began, he appeared, arms full of bags, a little out of breath. "Lisa," he said with a gentle smile, "behind every successful woman, there's always a good man." As the plane lifted off, I looked out the window. The village where I was born grew smaller and smaller until it vanished beneath the clouds. But I knew one thing for sure: my story was only beginning. The fields below glimmered green, the wind rippled through the wheat like a song of life, and the horizon stretched ahead,